Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through everything I picked up within February and March. Just like with my January reading wrap up, I'll have this all broken up by genre and there will be timestamps that coordinate to the genres. If you are only interested in some, you can feel free of course to bounce around, and then if you're interested in a lot of different works, you are welcome to just let the video play. But regardless, I'll have all of the timestamps and relevant information for any of the books that I talk about in a pinned comment. I am not actually going to be going through everything I read in March because I am technically filming this only about partially through the month. The reason being, and this is semi-relevant, but also I just think it'll make some of you happy. So part of the month of February, I was dog sitting for my mom because my mom got married and she went on vacation after, and I was like, do you need me to dog sit? And she's like, that'd be great. And some of you have seen pictures of who I have described as my little buddy. His name is Dutton. Dutton is a sweet, derpy little lab, and he's very cute, and he's a good boy. He used to be very naughty, but he's not as naughty anymore. And when I say he used to be naughty, I mean he used to eat anything. So there was one time my mom had to take him to what is basically like a doggy daycare, and some dogs were getting in a little kerfuffle, and somebody who had been cleaning went to go help, and the rag that they had been wiping things down with, Dutton ate that rag, and fortunately they were able to get it to come up this way, so they didn't have to do surgery. But that gives you an example of just how willing he was to eat anything that crossed his path. So you couldn't leave anything even close to where he had access to it because he would destroy it. He's better about this now. He is also just a flopper. I mean, he'll just flop over and show you his belly for belly rubs, and he loves to play fetch, and he loves to defend home, and he'll bark at stuff, and he's a sweetie pie. He's a sweetie pie. So I thought some of you would enjoy seeing some pictures of Dutton. But not only did I dog sit Dutton for a week, I also was hosting friends for a week. So February, I didn't get as much reading in, so there's a lot more that I plan to be picking up. And then I tried to catch up as much as I could the week I was dog sitting and also since then. But I wanted to at least go through these before I didn't want to wait too long because then they're not as fresh in my head and other such things. I mostly am filling you in on this information just because I always like seeing cute pictures of dogs. I thought some of you might like seeing cute pictures of Dutton. Let's go ahead and jump into the reading wrap up for February and part of March. Last time I started with sci-fi. I didn't actually pick up any sci-fi this month, so we're just going to jump straight to classics, and we'll start with Wuthering Heights. And I had mentioned I had started Wuthering Heights in the last one, and I completed Wuthering Heights, and I thought it was amazing. I loved it. This was semi a buddy read with my husband, so I wasn't necessarily planning to pick this up as soon as I did, but I bought my husband some books for Christmas that he had mentioned being interested in. And Wuthering Heights, I thought, I'm pretty sure this is one he's gonna like. I have a friend who loves Wuthering Heights, and everything she's always said about it, I was like, this seems like something Sean would love. And Sean ended up picking it to buddy read it with his father because they have a monthly book club and they alternate who gets to pick the book. And for that one, I was like, I can read it with you if you want. And he was like, okay. So then we read it, and likely the discussion for Wuthering Heights won't be up just yet, but we are planning to do a discussion for this one similar to what we did with Frankenstein. And we also did not read this because of the adaptation. However, it happened to coordinate around when the adaptation was coming out. Hence, I was very annoyed with some of what was being said about the book and the casting and just some things that I wasn't a fan of. Regardless, I did do a video where I talked about how I don't plan to watch the movie because I don't really think that they care that much about the source material. And I don't mind if you make some changes, but you also, and whatever, that's not what this is about today. Wuthering Heights, though, I thought was phenomenal. I am now one of those people that is irritated that for some reason this has been thought of as a romance. It is not in the slightest. In fact, I would go as far as to say Heathcliff and Catherine, I wouldn't even consider them love interest to each other, borderline, to be honest. I mean, I think Heathcliff has this possessiveness over Catherine, and I think Catherine feels the need to try and shield him from certain things in the world because from a young age she saw the way that he was treated differently, and also she had been treated differently before. So I think she wants to try to protect him, but she also wants to have proximity to the things that would protect her in society. And some of those things are also responsible for the mistreatment that he's endured. And it creates a disaster. And it's also about generational trauma. And you see the next generation and how what has happened in the past is now impacting them. You see cycles of abuse. You see class issues, race issues, sexism. There's just so many things within this that are exceptionally well done. Exceptionally well done. And it's so irritating that because there's like vague outlines of maybe sort of characters that are obsessed with each other, that therefore this is a romance. It's not a romance. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna die on this hill, because if somebody insists upon that, then I'm just gonna be like, okay, I heavily disagree, and here's all the reasons why. But I I just am very adamant that it's not a romance, and it irritates me that the book has been thought of that way. And it doesn't help that there are a lot of adaptations that continue to push that idea of it. It really is a story about the complete breakdown of any semblance of humanity in people because of all of the other outside things, whether they be generational trauma or all the other things I listed. The setup, if you don't know, is you follow these two individuals, Heathcliff and Catherine, and also her brother and just their family in general. Heathcliff was kind of brought in and semi-adopted, you could say, so they grew up together. And then Catherine ends up marrying somebody, and you see him leave and disappear, and then he comes back with a vengeance, you could say, and he has the desire to just destroy her brother, to right the wrongs that he feels like were committed against them, or not even feels like, but that maybe were committed against him. But in the effort to do this, he has lasting impacts on everyone around him, and you see how that, as noted, then plays into the next generation, and you're seeing the ways that they're starting to possibly fit within this, how maybe they're not going to break away from it, but maybe there are chances for them, and what does that take and what does that look like. I thought that the writing was fantastic. It is a framing within this that we don't see as frequently these days, so it's almost like a person telling a story within a story. We saw something similar with Frankenstein. Reading these two back to back, they're not that similar, but the framing was interesting in that it was similar. So in Frankenstein, which I read earlier, it had somebody initially starting off writing someone they know, and then they're like, I met this man and he told me his story, and then that person tells you their story because they're telling the initial person, and then that person's kind of reflecting back. So it's a storyteller within a storyteller. And the same thing was sort of true within Wuthering Heights. You don't actually get the perspectives of the characters that are the main focus. You more so are hearing about them through somebody else. And then this is coming about because an additional person first is exposed to this and it's like, hey, servant lady, fill me in. So the framing is interesting, and it begs the question, is this a reliable narrator? Also, because you have to sort of see everything through the lens of this person. And there are instances where even this person will present something and you kind of wonder if it's skewed based off of what was considered proper or right in their society, because Heathcliff is always awful, always awful. And this other character, somebody will say to them, here's this man, he did these horrible things to me, and I hate him. They'll say a version of that, much more eloquently, of course. And the servant will be like, well, sounds like you need to open up your Bible. That's not very kind of you. And you're like, whoa, but they were abused by this person. What are you talking about? But then it just makes you wonder, how often is that way of perceiving things influencing how the story is told to you? So there's that question as well. And then it just kind of really focuses on how we all are constantly impacted by societal pressures and the impacts of those things on us in our interpersonal relationships, whether they be romantic, familial, or platonic. And I thought it was exceptional. I thought it was very, very good. And I am excited to be reading more classics because I have really enjoyed both the first two I've picked up. As noted, at some point there will likely be a very in-depth conversation about Wuthering Heights, so if you're interested in that, be on the lookout. I am looking forward to having that chat. Actually getting to things that are romance or fantasy romance. We'll start with contemporary romance and we'll get into romancy and fantasy romance. So starting with the contemporary romances, it was February, so I thought like, oh, let's pick up a couple. One of them was a little bit more on the explicit side, and there was more emphasis on those sorts of scenes. The other one was more of a cutesy love story. And I tend to not love the former as often because I prefer to have the plots lie in other places. But the book would be only for the week. The setup is that you follow this young woman whose sister is getting married, and there's a lot of stress behind the marriage, and there's a lot of drama. And the main character, she is finding herself very attracted to one of the friends of the groom. And he clearly is very attracted to her as well. And it's a vacation wedding. They're going to have a week or so where it's just the wedding party, and then the week of the wedding is when everybody else will arrive. So you're looking at just that week to start. And these two characters are basically like, hey, we're in this beautiful place. There's a lot of drama with the bride and the groom. Why don't we just enjoy each other's company? And in doing this, they start to really discover more about each other, what they want out of life. Our main character specifically is realizing the ways that maybe her mother and her sister haven't been treating her the way she deserves to be treated. And it's through this romantic connection that she has that she starts to see how she actually should be treated. And then you then go into the actual week of the wedding and drama ensues. And it is a very high drama kind of story. And I kind of almost wished that it was just about the drama because it was entertaining. The drama was entertaining, certainly with a family or making assumptions. And it was almost like watching reality TV where you're like, oh my gosh, these people, what? I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they did that. What? You just the over the top reactions, right? So I thought that the entertainment factor was there, and the intimate scenes, I didn't think they were done in a way where I was like, that was so weird or anything like that, or it was written weird or anything. It wasn't like that by any means. It's just not my kind of story necessarily. So I think if you are somebody who's a big fan of contemporary romances that lean into the explicit quite a lot, then you might end up really, really liking this one. It was just not the kind of story that I'm necessarily looking for. The other contemporary romance I read was The Neighbor Favor. I was quite fond of the way that the man in the story, that his life and his relationship with his parents, and very specifically his father, how that has impacted his actions, and how that also doesn't just impact what he does in his career, his day-to-day life, but it does impact his ability to form a close relationship with somebody. And the way it was done, I thought was very realistic and also very, very sad. And you wanted to root for him to be able to break the cycle that has already started. And I thought the way it was showcased and the way it played out was quite well done. The setup for the story, however, it was almost like there were multiple setups that I thought maybe we could have condensed it a little bit. So the initial setup was that the main character, she has a author, a series that's unfinished that she's always loved, but the author, nobody knows anything about him. And then one day she sees out of nowhere, years and years and years after the story has been written, but there have never been any sequels, she realizes that out of nowhere this author created a website. So just kind of on a whim, she sends a, I really hope that you're writing more. I can't thank you enough for the, she's writing just a very nice, I'm a fan, I like your books. And he ends up responding to this. And then they have this back and forth that starts to become kind of cute and then starts to become a little flirty. They get to know each other through this back and forth. So you follow this, and then out of nowhere, it gets cut off. And she has no idea what happened. She also wonders, was I even talking to the real author? She feels like an idiot. She also struggles with feeling like she understands social cues and stuff too, so that she feels even stupider. She doesn't want to tell anybody about it because she feels like everyone in her family is always looking at her, waiting for her to be successful, and she's just the one sister who doesn't have her life together is what she feels like, even though her family is nice and everything. And then cue now where the characters meet, and you know who each of the characters are, but they don't realize initially that they are now neighbors. They live in the same building. He figures it out pretty quickly. She doesn't realize who he is though, because he had a pen name and he never told her his real name. And he is like, oh my gosh, this is the woman that I was starting to fall for, even though I'd never met. And now that I'm meeting her in person, I like her even more. But how do I tell her that I was the guy that she was messaging? I have to pretend like I don't know her. And he is struggling with all that. And then she's just trying to live her everyday life. So that was the initial setup, which I already feel like is enough. But then there was this additional layer to the setup where it was almost like you combined two shenanigans filled stories together, because then the second portion is that she needs a date to something, to her sister's wedding, specifically another wedding. She needs a date, and her sisters are always, and her family, they're always trying to set her up with people, and she never likes it. And so she tells them, she kind of makes this bet with them that, hey, if I find my own date, you guys are never allowed to set me up with anybody ever again. I'm tired of it. And they're like, okay, but if we win, you have to keep going out with these guys, basically, is the setup. She's really determined to get a date. And so she tries initially to see if he wants to go, but because he realizes, oh my gosh, this is the girl and I don't know how to tell her that, he was like, I'm not really looking for a relationship right now. She really is like, how about you teach me how to be flirty and actually know how to talk to people? So that was like the second plot point, where the second setup plot point, I mean. So there's two, and I didn't really feel like that second one was necessary. I just felt like they could have just gotten to know each other, and it could have been one of those books where there's the trope of I have a secret. It could have been one of those, and that would have been fine. So I thought that the way everything was built was a little much, but I did really feel like how the guy's backstory was written was really, really well done. And I don't want to reveal too much, of course, because if you do plan to pick it up, I don't want to tell you everything. But he has a father who is very in and out of his life. He struggles with how he handles money. He has put his mom and him in really difficult situations. And there's a lot more to it than just that. But the complications of that dynamic were really, really, really well done. So I liked the book for that. And the couple, they were pretty cute. But it wasn't my absolute favorite contemporary romance I've read. But I did enjoy aspects of it quite a bit. For romantasy, the two books we have would be The Legend of the Nine-Tailed Fox as well as Heart's Gambit. I'll start with Legend of the Nine-Tailed Fox. Unlike the contemporary romance I was just talking about, this one has a pretty straightforward premise. You follow a character who is a nine-tailed fox. So she has to feed off of humans. And then there is a demon hunter that tries to eliminate any kinds of threats to his city. And these two end up kind of going at each other. But then something happens where they are both forced into hell, and they're trying to ascend the different levels of hell to make it back into the world. And even though they are mortal enemies, or maybe in her case, a creature enemy, despite this, they have to work together to try and escape. And maybe along the way, they start to see the humanity in one another. He's not just the hunter, and she's not just the creature to be hunted, the monster to be hunted. And I was surprised because I actually found the relationship to be kind of wholesome. I wasn't expecting that, because it's like enemies to lovers kind of thing, and literally he is trying to hunt monsters and she's a monster. And so I thought it would be edgy, and it was kind of cute. Their dynamics were kind of sweet. And also the story progressed at a nice pace. I thought it was fun. I thought the creativity in how lore is incorporated and the different kinds of monsters are incorporated, I thought that was really fun. It is just a standalone, so I thought for a standalone format, it utilized that really nicely. And it was a fun time. And as noted, I don't have to say a whole lot else, because that kind of just gives you a general idea if it is something that you're interested in checking out. I will say, because there's a lot of debate about how much romance makes it so that it's fantasy romance versus romantasy. So I'll say that I think that this was actually a little bit less on the romance side, and a little bit more plot forward and a little more character forward. So if you are somebody that likes a little bit more of a blend, or you like the romance to take a little bit more of a backseat, but you like it incorporated into your stories, this one might be more so for you. If you're somebody who you like it to be the main point, that is less what you're going to get with this one. As for Heart's Gambit, I thought when it initially started, I was really, really invested. I thought I was really going to like this one a lot. But I thought that how things progressed, it started to feel a little bit scattered. And the premise is that you have, at the beginning of the story, there is this woman who basically has this curse that she casts upon these two individuals. So anybody within their families, this curse is going to continue with. And you then fast forward to a little bit later where you have the descendants of this horrible situation, and they are almost forced to fight each other, and there always is going to be some kind of competition, sort of. It's not really like a I'm in a coliseum fighting other people sort of competition. It's more of just the whoever the person is that made this curse, it's like she has to have this continued feeding of the curse in order to benefit from it. And so it's like entertainment just for her. And so at some point, there will be somebody in each of these families who will be forced to fight somebody from this other family. And it just so happens that the two characters who are going to be forced to fight each other are determined to find a way to break the curse and free their families from the hatred they've developed for each other. Because even though the curse is at fault at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that there have been decades and decades of these families killing each other's family members that they love very much. So there is sort of this, I think, almost meta, this idea of where do we actually put the blame? And even though we're hurting each other, there's something greater at work that's pushing us against each other. There's something greater at work that benefits from keeping us distracted or keeping us fighting each other instead of them. So I do think that that layer was really well done. I thought that the writing was vibrant and creative and pretty. It was compared in the comp to Stephanie Garber, and I can see some of those comparisons. I think Stephanie Garber is a little bit more whimsical than within this one. Because the families actually have some time traveling abilities, I did think that that was incorporated well with the actual writing of describing various different scenes or describing the setting in this time and creating the feeling of that time. I thought that was done well. However, I felt like the plot itself was a little, the word I used before was a little scattered. Something would seem kind of pressing, but yet they'd be doing other stuff. And I don't know if I thought that the balance quite worked for me. Also, the ending, I thought kind of, I don't want to say too much about the ending, but I thought that it was done and it kind of wasn't. And I was like, oh, I didn't love how that played out. So it ended up unfortunately not working for me. But if any of the aspects of the story sound interesting to you, I wouldn't say no, don't check it out. It just didn't end up fitting my taste. Getting into some fiction books, the three I picked up would be The Vanishing Half, Such a Fun Age, and Monday's Not Coming. I'll go ahead and start with Such a Fun Age. This book was borderline satirical, at least in how I read it, in that it was very, very well showcasing everything that it was intending to, but it would do so sometimes in a way where it was so painfully cringy, and it felt extreme but also realistic at the same time, which I think is why I thought it was almost satirical in nature, because I think what satire does really well is it holds up a mirror and really forces you to look at things, but it does so through what feels like absurdism at times. And I thought Such a Fun Age really did this well. It doesn't start feeling quite like that, though. It starts out feeling almost very mundane and day-to-day and normal. And the further in you go, especially with one character in particular, you're like, oh my gosh, are you serious? So the setup is that you follow this young woman who is a babysitter for this very, very wealthy family. And a lot of the story is examining race and how people treat each other. And also, I would say more specifically, how people who are white in America treat people who are black, and how it's always their allyship is always to prop themselves up, less to actually show care for not only black people, but a lot of various different things that impact black people, that have impacted them and that have continued to impact them. And in this story, you are looking at the different versions of this through this wealthy family that our main character is a babysitter for, as well as this young man who she ends up dating. And it gets a little over the top in the plot as far as you start to discover a little bit more about how maybe some of the people that she has in her life actually have been in each other's lives or have known each other, or they have had impacts on each other's lives, and you're just seeing all this kind of intertwined mess that occurs. But the initial thing that kicks this story off is that you have our main character. She gets called late at night when she was at a friend's birthday party, and the mom of the wealthy family says, "Can you come babysit my daughter? We have the police here because somebody ended up doing something to our house, and we just don't really want her here for all of that." And she's like, "Okay, sure," because she could use the money, and also she really likes the little girl. She's pretty much a toddler. So she comes, picks her up, and then goes to just this nice little grocery store that's open. And they decide, meaning some people that are at this fancy grocery store, she just looks suspicious. It looks suspicious to see this woman with this particular little girl. So the security guard comes over, a customer comes over, and they're pretty much accusing her of kidnapping this little girl. And then somebody records this, there's a video of it, and she really doesn't want this video to get out. She doesn't want her whole life to become filtered through this one moment that was unexpected for her. She almost feels embarrassed by it. She doesn't like the spotlight. She's not trying to sue anybody. Other people are telling her, you know, you could probably sue them. You could get so much out of them. And she's like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to keep living my life. Can I just keep living my life? And a lot of the story is about exceptionalism and the way that people don't have the freedom necessarily always to just live by their own terms and to be content with whatever it is they have, and the pressures that get put on them to be something, especially when you are viewed through, you represent an entire group. You can't just represent yourself. So that aspect of the story was done really well. The man that she ends up dating, his constant desire to prove pretty much that he is on her side and he stands by her, at some point it starts to become so uncomfortable. And then the woman who is the mother of the family that she babysits for, this lady is crazy. She's crazy. And you're reading it, and there are times, what I thought made this so well done is there are times where you can resonate with certain feelings she has. She's like the quintessential obnoxious lean in kind of lady who just only ever looks at the ways that she has been not even always wronged, but just the ways that she hasn't been able to get as much that she wants. She always is looking at that, and she's never looking at certain other issues, but she's also always so concerned with trying to look cool. She just really wants to look cool. She's like, I can't let her think that I like these other moms. These moms are such losers. I'm cool, I'm hip, I know what I'll do. After other people leave at some point, I'll show her some great wine that I have, and I'll show her I'm a really cool person. And it's like, it's so cringy, and you're reading it and you're like, this is a real person. There are people like this, and you can resonate with certain things about her, but then she just goes to the extreme, and that's why she's humanized, but she's so insane. And I just, the whole time I was like, oh my gosh, the whole book, it just kept getting worse and worse and snowballing. And this poor young woman who is just trying to live her life, and everybody is making all these decisions for her. Everybody's telling her what she's supposed to do. Everybody is trying to impose onto her how they feel she should basically represent her own blackness to the world, or how she should take advantage of who she is. You know, you should really do this for yourself. I'm proud of you. It's all just like, let her live her own life by her own terms. It's so uncomfortable, but it's such a great examination, I think, of the ways in which people treat each other. And it was entertaining. It feels, it's one of those things where satire, that's why I think satire can be tricky, is because you don't want to lean so far into the entertainment that it feels like you're making a mockery of everything. You want to at least respect what it is you're trying to examine. And I think that this book did it very, very, very well. From there, we have Monday's Not Coming. This story was absolutely devastating. One of those that you kind of just sit there after you finish reading the book kinds of stories. And the setup is that you follow this young girl, this young high school girl, middle school to high school age, and she is excited to go back to school and meet up with her best friend and just continue to live life. It's kind of a coming of age feeling, and she is the one narrating the story, and so it does do a really great job of capturing that time in a young person's life. However, when she shows up after summer break, her best friend isn't there, and she can't figure out what's happened to her. She just in different classes. I haven't heard from her. I'll try calling her. Her friend doesn't live in an area that her family particularly likes her going to, but she tries to go there anyway, and the mother is like, go away, she doesn't want to talk to you. She's trying to figure out, is she even at school? So now she's trying to talk to other teachers, to counselors, and it just seems as though nobody is paying enough attention to how weird it is that her friend is gone. She is starting to wonder if something happened. Supposedly her friend's sister, is who she has run into, is saying like she's here with this family member, and then someone else is saying she's with this family member, another person saying something else. Everybody has these conflicting stories, and our main character just doesn't know what to make of any of it, but she can just feel that something isn't right. It is both a coming of age story, as I said, but also an examination of how people can get lost within the system, no matter how many people are around, no matter how many people knew this individual, no matter basically the circumstances. There are some people that slip through, and a lot of the times the people that slip through and the reasons why nothing gets done is because there's always another thing. So there's a scene that I feel like is really well done, where our character is just so beside herself with worry that she finally just goes to the police department and she tells them, my friend isn't coming to school, I haven't seen her, I don't know what's happened to her. And they're like, are you sure she didn't just run away? And they take her to this wall of young people that they know for sure have disappeared and possibly been kidnapped. And they're like, the thing is, we can't just stop everything because these girls really need us, or these children really need us. And if your friend just ran away, she doesn't have a good home life or something, then, that's valuable resources spent searching for her. Or then if you have scenes where she's talking to someone in the counseling office, they're like, oh, well, it says that she did this. And they're like, yeah, I know, but we checked last week and we already mentioned that. And it's like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to get that. I forgot to make that call. Sorry. And there's just always something. And it's devastating as you're reading, because this whole time, it also goes back and forth between before and after and during. And the whole time you're just thinking, oh my gosh, did something happen to this young girl? And if so, what was it? And the dread that you're feeling as the story progresses, the dread that you can sense coming off of our character, and how much you wish you could just jump in and fix it all for her, and the way all the adults are constantly trying to tell her, no, everything's fine, it's all right, calm down, I'm sure it's nothing. It is tremendously painful, but it was, I thought, very well done. If you pick this book up, just be ready for some very, very challenging things. That last statement can also be applied to this next book, The Vanishing Half. This book, of the three, I enjoyed all three of these. Enjoyed is maybe not even the right word necessarily for all three of these, but especially not for Monday's Not Coming. But regardless, I thought all of these were well done. The Vanishing Half, though, there's something about it that was just on another level for me. It was so exceptional in showcasing the way in which people will gravitate towards the very thing that actually harmed them in the first place in an effort to not be harmed again. That is only one piece of this story. There are so many other things about it. The setup is that you follow these two women from the time that they are very, very young into their adult years, and then you are looking at their children as well. So it's somewhat a generational story. And the thing that sort of kicks off their life as far as the defining factor in how they end up living for a long time after that is that when they were very young, their father was lynched. And they witnessed this. It was horrific, as you would imagine. And they're twins. They also are white passing. So their proximity to whiteness and how that plays out throughout the course of the story, and how it plays out differently for each sister, dictates how they live their lives. It dictates how they treat their children, and then it also dictates a lot in their children's lives. When I say that this story does a great job in showing how a person can go toward the thing that actually caused them harm in the first place, what I mean is that you see one of the sisters, she starts to recognize the power that she has in the fact that she can pass for white, and she starts to lean into that. And you understand why she's doing this. She's doing this because it is safer for her. Because you're also looking at a time when lynching was semi-common. So for her, she never really talks about this incident that occurred. She doesn't really ever process it. she just is trying to escape the feeling of ever being in danger like that. So you watch her as she continues to abandon the part of herself that would put her in more danger and starts to really lean into the part that provides her this semblance of protection. However, her entire life, her identity, all of it, she kind of has to keep a secret from pretty much everybody that she ends up having in her life. And I am going to mention a scene that I feel like really, really, really showcases how much she falls into the very things that cause so many of the problems in society. And if you don't want to hear about this scene because it's semi-spoilery, then I'll have a little timestamp and you can jump ahead. But because she has passed for white for so long, and she ends up marrying somebody who is white, and they have their own feelings about certain groups of people, and they don't want violence, and they don't like them being heavily mistreated, but also they don't belong in our neighborhood. She has a husband that's like that. He's very wealthy, so she has this feeling of like, oh, I don't have to worry about ever being harmed. Like, she doesn't verbalize this, she's not literally thinking it, but you can recognize that that is the thing that propels her towards this lifestyle. So she's lied about her entire life. She pretty much just says like, oh yeah, my family, they all died. And her husband doesn't really know her at all. And there's a part in the story where they live in a very nice neighborhood, and there is a family, and they're Black, and they want to move into this neighborhood, and the husband is like, we need to come together to keep them from living here, and we should tell the homeowners association that all of us will leave if they let these people in, because this starts with just this family, but then a bunch of them are going to move in. And she doesn't do a thing. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't try to say, maybe we shouldn't treat other people like this. And you want to shake her and tell her, what are you doing? Because she'll participate in her high society friends. Whenever they get together, there is this like, oh yeah, exactly, yeah. And you're like, no, not yeah, not yeah. This sort of othering and this dehumanizing people is eventually going to lead to the thing that had this horrible impact in your life. However, you recognize her absolute fear and why she is constantly kind of incognito, why she constantly feels the need to hide anything about herself, even when she waves at the other family or something like that. That's something as simple as that, or being seen having spoken to them by the other neighbors. She's terrified because then she thinks my whole life's going to unravel. They're going to find out who I really am, and then they're going to come after me. And it doesn't help when she has her own child, because then she thinks, I have to protect this child. Everything about her life is a secret, and everything she has to keep from everyone. And it leads her to also then end up participating in acts that are also racist. What I think is very, very difficult to do with this sort of setup and this sort of story, when you're watching somebody who starts to actively participate in the mistreatment of other groups of people that they themselves are a part of, it's just so easy to frame that person in a cartoonishly villainous way, or to not give them anything that makes them even somewhat a person we can empathize with, or somebody who we recognize the origin of why they're doing what they're doing. I think the easy route is to just make them terrible and to make them an antagonist. But to actually just show a person in a way that feels rooted in true psychological understanding of people's reasons and decision making, I found it to be very powerful, because when we talk about works of fiction, we talk about the ways that it can allow us to understand each other and to try to lead with empathy. This is a book that really shows you can feel for her, you can absolutely understand why she got to this point without necessarily feeling the need to defend her every action. You can see at the point that she starts to go in the wrong direction, but you also think like, well, she's gone through something more traumatic than most people could ever even fathom. So you understand how that would impact her life, and you understand that we don't have a society that allows for her to process that in a way that doesn't potentially lead her to then go toward the thing and seek protection from the thing that caused the harm in the first place. Obviously, it's not the people that she chooses to surround herself with. It's not like they were the exact same people, but they exhibit certain things that also they are a part of the very problems. And so I just think we need more books like this to really see how we get to these places. I think it helps people better understand, because that is a problem. I think most of us, we see sometimes people do things and we just think, how could you possibly do that? Because we only see them in a certain time and place. We only see where they've arrived. We didn't see how they got there. And then once you see how they got there, then it allows for you to understand. By having a society that tries to actually allow for this, you are going to progress and you are going to have things get better. It was very well done, and that's only a part of the story. That's only really talking about one of the sisters. The other sister, you see a lot of what occurs when there is abuse and what it takes to actually kind of free yourself from that and to get away. But then the impacts that trying to do something for yourself will have on your children when maybe they don't have the full story or they don't understand everything in its entirety. And that was exceptional as well. I think that it's not that I don't think that was as well done. I just think that those sorts of stories have been done more often than what I saw with the other section, the other half, to make a stupid pun. The other half of the story, I think it's just, I've not seen too many stories that depict that so incredibly well. And I have seen a few more that depict some of what occurs to the other character. But again, there's just so much to dissect about this book that if even a little bit of it sounds like it'd be very poignant and impactful to you, then absolutely, I would recommend this to basically everybody. I thought it was fantastic. We will talk about a little bit of manga and one historical fiction before finally segueing into fantasy. I know it's been a while, but I'll just say really quick the manga that I've been reading, actually manga and light novels. So I know a lot of you know that last year I dove into the Apothecary Diaries light novels, first light novel series that I've ever gotten into, and I have been slowly at a snail's pace been reading the 15th light novel, because I don't believe that the English translation of the 16th light novel is going to be coming out until May. And also we're not going to get the third season of the anime for a while. So all I have right now is this 15th light novel, and I am taking my time with it. So I'm still in the process of reading it, but I did want to at least say that I thought that the arc for volumes around volume 11, 12, 10, like those volumes have a really great arc, and I think it's my favorite arc. Not I think, I know it's my favorite arc of the story so far. But as far as individual arcs within a single light novel go, I actually have been really enjoying this one. I really like the way that our character feels like she's finally getting to really get to a, for a lack of a better term, final form in something that she is very interested in and something she cares very much about, the main character being Mao Mao. It's just been really great to see the progression when you think back at the beginning and you see where she started and where her passions lie, but the restrictions that are placed upon her and where she is in this volume. It's really exciting, but it's also very dangerous. So you once again recognize why this character for so long has been resistant to certain things, because within their society, these things are not necessarily allowed for people of her gender and her class. So getting to see how she gets to actually be involved in certain things is really exciting and intriguing and, again, dangerous. And then also the questions of the individual plotline of what will happen if something goes wrong within this particular plot also has a lot of questions for another character, kind of like our other main character. And that feeling of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What are they going to do? And even if things work out, it does force them to acknowledge certain possibilities and maybe would accelerate a certain timeline of certain things, or it would do the reverse where it'd make them realize certain things maybe are always going to be impossibilities. And I just think how this arc has been done is very great. If you want more about Apothecary Diaries, because this is not necessarily the time for me to go into a full in-depth thing about Apothecary Diaries, I have an entire playlist on my side channel dedicated to the both light novels, the reading of the light novels, as well as the anime, and also deep dive into one of the characters, kind of a video essay. So if you're interested in any of that, I'll have it linked. But I always enjoy coming back to Apothecary Diaries. And then Spy Family. I'm all caught up. I have been reading it on Shonen Jump and dying for each new chapter every single week. Every time I get to the end of the newest one, I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So it's one of the only stories I think where I've been keeping up with it by chapter. I pretty much never do that because it's just not enough most of the time. I need more. But with Spy Family, I'm okay with getting my little bit of fix of Spy Family. I love these characters so much. It's so much fun. If you know nothing about Spy Family, if you've never checked out anime or manga, Spy Family I think is a pretty good one because it's really funny. It plays off of a lot of the kind of espionage types of stories, and it kind of like pays homage, but then is completely making fun of it at the same time. You follow a spy named Lloyd who has to, for reasons that are explained very early on, he has to adopt a young daughter for his mission. So he adopts this little girl, Anya. But then also for part of the mission, he needs to get married. So he marries this woman who he does not realize is an assassin. She doesn't know he's a spy, and the little girl knows about both of their identities because she can read minds, but nobody knows that she can read minds, nor do people know that that's even possible. And it sounds like absolute chaos, and it kind of is, but in the best of ways. It's so funny. It's such a great time, and I need people to catch up with the manga because a lot of my friends like Spy Family as well, and nobody is as caught up. No, nobody is caught up, and I'm dying to talk to them about it, and I can't talk about it yet. So if you have and you want to be like spoilers, and then you want to talk about the newest parts of Spy Family, I would appreciate that because I need to talk about it so much. I've been very much enjoying. Also, there's the dumbest panel with stupid Yuri in some of the newer ones that it always makes me laugh, but just how ridiculous it can be at times is great. So really thoroughly been enjoying Spy Family. The only historical fiction book that I picked up recently would be Sisters in Arms. And I was really excited about this one because it's rooted in a real event in history and real women in history that I didn't know pretty much anything about. Unfortunately, I don't really feel like it utilized what it was trying to write about. So Sisters in Arms is about this particular group of Black women that were actually enlisted during World War II. They weren't necessarily on the front lines, but they were a part of the military during World War II. And this is something that I don't know basically anything about. Also, I have not yet completed it, but I thought this would pair really well with the nonfiction book that I'm currently reading called Half American, which is about Black soldiers during World War II. Also, we talk a little bit about, from what I've read so far, a little bit about how Black soldiers were treated during World War I, and then also we're looking at, I believe, how they're going to be treated when they come back. You have young men, and this is actually something that got discussed in the nonfiction book Devil in the Grove as well. But you have young men who, if they were just wearing their uniforms in an area where people decided, no, that's not okay, I don't like seeing a Black man trying to show off, quote unquote, then they would kill him. I mean, that kind of stuff happened all the time. So this is the kind of thing that I'm expecting, I'm going to see the hardships that are these women are having to face. And I'm going to see things I never really knew about this group of people and this time. And instead, a lot of the story was, almost you could just take the military aspect of the story out and all the complexities that lie with that, and you can kind of just talk about two ladies, and it wouldn't have felt that different, which is sort of not what I felt like I was getting, or what I thought I was getting something different when I picked it up. So that surprised me a little bit. A lot of the story ended up being about fulfilling familial expectations, or all the ways in which you feel like you're failing your family, and the ways in which you feel like how your family treats you isn't really very fair. And we could have just had a story about that. I was kind of surprised that the setting was meant to be these women during World War II because I didn't feel like we focused on it that much. It was almost like that was the backdrop. And then we still just kind of stuck to this one character wanting to pursue something with jazz, but feeling pressure to instead go to Juilliard and pursue classical music. And then the other character, she wants to cover important stories. And that was more, I felt like, the focus for them individually. And then together, they were just always so snippy and childish with each other. It didn't quite feel like the time period was represented because, as noted about the example I gave of things that would happen that I was reading about in Half American, and also the nonfiction book Devil in the Grove, both of those are nonfiction to be clear. Those kinds of events were terrible. Also, they were things that, kind of like what we talked about with The Vanishing Half, there was like an awareness of the level of danger that you are in just by existing in this time. And these characters always seemed surprised in a way that didn't feel accurate. So some examples, you would have characters that if they're trying to get a cab, the cab driver would initially stop and then would see them and they would drive off. Or another example is there's a woman at one point who's carrying a lot of stuff and she obviously is struggling and one of the characters offers to help her and initially she looks relieved until she sees, oh, it's a black woman, I don't want to accept help from a black woman. Or there's a time where they're taking a means of transportation and another woman insists that they be put on a different train car because she just can't possibly share the same train car as them. And when I say it didn't feel like the setting was researched in a way where it felt like what you would expect, is that almost every single one of these instances that would occur over the course of the book, they always acted surprised in a way that felt more modern. So a lot of these things, a lot of the behaviors that I'm describing that were depicted in the story, certainly by today's standards, we would look at that and most people would go, are you serious? Come on. And a lot of people would be more than just, are you serious? We would be furious at that kind of, or we should be furious at that kind of behavior. There's no place for it. But that mindset and that reaction was kind of how they would react too. They acted very modern. And there's another time where it's nothing to do with that, but one of the characters is talking to her father about how he expects certain things of her and he never actually listens to her. And she says something like, this is my truth. I think she uses the phrase my truth. And that felt kind of modern. And just some of the ways that they behaved and spoke, it seemed more like somebody today looking back and being upset by those sorts of acts. And as a result, it just didn't feel like we were fully capturing the level of perseverance and resilience it takes to push back against those sorts of acts. And also then the additional layers of complexity that comes with if you are somebody who your country often is not doing much to protect you, but then you're enlisting in something that you're thinking, in their case, they were like, this will maybe allow for me to have more opportunities. And then some of the family members thinking, actually, it might not. They might actually mistreat you. They might just be using you. And all the complexities that come with that was kind of only a little bit off to the side. And I thought we would get a lot more of that. So I wouldn't say that it wasn't that it was terrible. It felt like the idea of it ended up being more of a backdrop as opposed to the main focus. So it just wasn't really what it presented itself to be quite as fully as I was hoping. Now, finally getting to our fantasy books. There is one fantasy book that I thought was very good, and then two that unfortunately didn't really work for me. I will start with the two that didn't really work for me so that we can end on a positive. So one of the ones that didn't really work for me would be A Land So Wide. This is by Aaron A. Craig. I have enjoyed Aaron A. Craig's works, some more than others, but I've always liked everything I picked up by Aaron A. Craig. This was the first time I picked something up that it wasn't just that, oh, this isn't quite what I was looking for, or this isn't what I've come to expect from Aaron A. Craig's works. It wasn't even just that. This kind of read to me similar to an experience I had last year, where for those of you who have picked up V.E. Schwab, V.E. Schwab has a lot of really well-known works, a lot of works that are really well-loved, but there's also the book The Near Witch that was kind of V.E. Schwab's first attempt at writing a novel, and it is stated as that. So when you pick it up, you're aware that this was her first attempt, so you're not really going into it expecting it to read quite like her newer works do. However, it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't read like the other works, and thus I wouldn't consider it as good. This read to me almost as if it was this author's previous maybe efforts to write. The pacing was a little strange. The characterization was a little odd. The tone especially was the part that I think was the most inconsistent, because in some ways it read very, very youthful and young, and then you'd be reminded of the character's age and she's not a young teenager, and you're like, oh, she's an adult. I keep forgetting because she does not act like one. I felt that And maybe this is just me hyperfixating on the editing thing that I kind of have returned to a lot recently. But when we talk about editing, oftentimes we're talking about on a sentence by sentence level, or we are talking about it feels like a lot of stuff could have been cut. It feels like this could have been trimmed. It feels like this could have been told in a more efficient manner. It could have been tighter. And this book felt like it just wasn't developed maybe in the same way that previous works by this author have been. Because The 13th Child, I really liked. And in this book, I was very surprised it was the same author. It just didn't read like it had all the time in the oven, we'll say. It didn't feel like it had finished cooking. If you don't know anything about the setup, you follow this society where you are seeing these people that you're wondering, were they stranded? Are they're trapped here in this place, and it almost seems like magically trapped. But are some of the characters doing this themselves? Is there some grand conspiracy? So it's very intriguing initially, but they have these very old-fashioned ways of looking at how society should function. And you can't tell if it's almost like a cult. It's very mysterious at first. You're really kind of, you're curious what's going on. So all that's happening, and there's some like almost horror elements too, where you're wondering, wait, are there actual creatures, or are there people that pretend to keep everybody in line? You're wondering this, you have all these question marks. And then there's also this plot line about how young women in the town will run away, pretty much, and then not so long after, the young men try to find them, and if they do find them, then that woman is now their wife. And our main character is really hoping that the guy that she cares about the most will be the one to find her. And you're like, this is an interesting plot line to have emerge in this. And her father clearly doesn't want her to marry this guy, but she really wants to marry this guy and just have a happy life with him. And he seems pretty nice. But then there's all this history behind their families and everything that happened in the past and why that impacts the way her father feels about his family and the way his family feels about her family. And then her best friend goes missing, and there's just like all these pieces, and it felt like multiple stories, or it felt like it could have been one really great story had each of the plot points had time to develop. And then once the main story kind of kicks off, you're like, what about all that other stuff? For so long you're wondering, and then you get some explanations. Certainly, I don't want to act as though you completely forget about all that other stuff, but you get some explanations. But the whole girls running off and boys capturing them pretty much, and then now you're my bride, that whole thing, like that, I would argue didn't have to even be in the book at all. And it was so all over the place. Unfortunately, I was so bummed. I was bummed about this one. I was really looking forward to it. It just felt like I was reading an early version of it, and this was the final version. And this is something I'm starting to feel more and more often these days with some of the new releases, where I think there's something here that would be really compelling and really, really great, but it just doesn't quite have enough time to it. And then it just, I come away thinking like, why didn't we do a little bit more with this? I feel like it's a disservice to the authors as well, because this seems to keep happening with books that either are established authors, where it feels like maybe publishing knows that authors are going to sell anyway, or it can happen with brand new authors, but these authors maybe already have either a large social media following from someplace else or for some other reason, thus publishing is pretty sure it's going to sell. Or they've decided, we're picking this person as our chosen one, we're going to just back this story because it's very marketable, and we're going to put so much into it that it's almost impossible for it to fail. It feels like those two scenarios, I am feeling anyway. It's not like I have concrete evidence of this, but it feels like this is occurring more frequently. And I kind of wonder if that's a little bit the first description I gave. I'm wondering a little bit if that's somewhat what happened with this. Or it could just be it didn't work for me. That's always possible too. But unfortunately, to sum up, it did not work for me. Next up, we have The Ballad of Black Tom. And one of my friends, whose channel I'll have linked, really enjoys this work. I find that if you are somebody who is hesitant to pick up novellas or short stories because you just feel like you really can't get as invested in a short amount of time, this is not going to change your mind. There are some shorter works where I genuinely think, no, actually, they can. And there are some authors that just excel at it. This author, I thought, immediately I was very intrigued. Immediately I was very captured by their prose, and I very much look forward to reading something else by this author. However, I didn't think there was enough time for me to really be as invested as I want to be. I do know, though, that, and my friend is a good example of this, that if you have a lot more awareness of Lovecraft, then I think that this book is really, or this novella, I think it probably will speak to you very differently. I don't have pretty much any knowledge at all, so some of the references and things, maybe I would have felt a little bit more invested if I actually had more of the awareness, because then I'd have certain things clued in. It's almost like with retellings. Sometimes with retellings, you don't always feel the need as the author to literally lay everything out, because there's kind of this, oh, the readers will come to this and they know how the story typically plays out, or they know what the plot progression is supposed to be. They know the antagonist, they know the main characters, they have this awareness, so I don't have to write it as if they're completely unaware. So it's possible that that was part of the equation as well. But it kicks off when our main character, his father, is killed, and pretty much nobody is going to pay a price for this. And he, in some ways, it's not that he thinks it's his fault, but he does wonder if certain actions could have helped prevent this. And he pretty much just allows himself to dwell in his rage. And you see the progression of that. And it's definitely very horror leaning. But I despite really liking the writing, I just unfortunately felt like this could have been much more impactful had we had a little bit more time. What it did do, though, is made me very excited to read this other book that I have by this author that I've been wanting to read for a long time, because how they incorporated the horror elements and how they just write the characters. There's also almost like a layer of cutting through to something kind of funny and very real about human beings. And I can't wait to see how that plays out in some of the other works by this author. Ending on a high note, we have The Poet Empress. This is a story that throughout the book, I was like, this could go south. I don't know how this is going to play out, but this could end up being something I am not a fan of at all. So I'm intrigued and I'm with you, but you could lose me. It was that feeling for a lot of it. And I think that that feeling is because a lot of us have experienced stories where certain things are romanticized. I can say that I don't think you have to worry about that. I think the fear is legitimate because so many of us have seen it so many times, but I think rest assured this author is taking care with what they're showing. And I'm going to tie this a little bit back to The Vanishing Half, despite the fact that this is nothing to do with the same sorts of trauma within this, but a lot of The Poet Empress is examining the way in which we become so monstrous as people, and also the impacts of what happens when we become terrible as a result of our trauma. If you hold a lot of power, that does not just mean is going to negatively impact you and those close to you. It will impact everyone. And so you are looking at these cycles of people being mistreated and how it has resulted in present day. Our main character is somebody who is very poor, and in her effort to try and provide for her family, she decides to present herself as an option for becoming a concubine for the people who rule over all of them. Her hope is that if she becomes somebody, especially a valued concubine within this system, then perhaps some food and maybe even some comfort will be given over to her village, and maybe she can have an impact. Maybe she can whisper in the ear, maybe you should help these people, maybe you should provide food to these people, maybe you need to go here and provide more protection here. So she's hopeful, and she's willing to give up pretty much her entire life for this, because that would be meaningful enough. She has seen the way poverty has devastated her family. So many of her siblings have died. She has one brother who is still alive, and she so badly wants to ensure that he has a chance to learn and that he can be educated, and also that he can just literally live and not starve to death because things are that dire. When she enters into this system, unfortunately, the people in power are extremely dangerous and they are very violent. If you go into this book, a heads up that there are a lot of really sinister, terrible things that occur within this, including things that happen to our main characters. Sometimes it's briefly mentioned, but sometimes it's on page. And you are seeing her trying to figure out not only how she can survive, but how she can push through so that she can try to make a difference, and all the ways in which she has to put herself in danger in order to do this. It is not an action-packed story whatsoever. It is, I would argue, almost entirely intrigue-based. You are constantly trying to figure out, are the other concubines trying to harm her? Is someone in power trying to use her for their own gain? And is this person trying to ally with this person who, because of this, that means they're her enemy, so then maybe she would try to ally with this person just to get back at them. There is so much intrigue that's within this, baked into every interaction, baked into every dynamic. And then through it all, you also have who very clearly is an antagonist, the person that she is hoping will select her and she will be a concubine to, this horrible, horrible man who just seems to love causing pain and suffering, and he doesn't seem to care about anyone or anything. And she is trying to understand him so that she can potentially manipulate him to do good. But then also, is she going to lose herself along the way? It's very dark, it's very heavy. I at least found myself constantly wondering what happened. What happened with him, his brother, who's another person that you have to consider. What happened to them? What went down with their family? What has happened in the past? Is there any way around this? Is there anything that can be done? And watching our character navigate it all, I thought was incredible. I thought it was exceptionally well done. I liked the writing within the story. I thought the characterization was fantastic. Like I said, I always wanted to turn the page. It is very dark, though. It is very heavy. It's not going to be for everyone, I think, as a result of that. But I also think that watching her push through it, she was resilient in such a quiet way. And the chances that she was taking, you always felt on edge for her. There would be something as simple as somebody finds a piece of paper, and you knowing the impact of that, you're like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? That's it though for this wrap up. I will have all relevant information in a pinned comment in case you'd like to refer to anything or reference back to anything that I talked about. And then of course, if you have thoughts on any of these books or recommendations, feel free to leave those in the comments. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.